Help is on the way as the governor signs a package of bills to address the housing crisis. But it could be years before any real change is effected.
The reality is San Diego has always been a main source of resettlement in the country.
Changes from the White House for refugees. President Trump wants to allow fewer into the nation. What the cut could mean for the San Diego region.
That morphed kid where it's like, that's all I could think of.
And ripped from the tabloid headlines, Batboy the musical delivers a wild show about tolerance, acceptance, and yes, a half-human, half-bat creature. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Governor Jerry Brown signed 15 bills today to help spur the development of affordable housing in the state. One part of the law is meant to deal with so-called NIMBYs, the not in my backyard crowd who have pressured local lawmakers into rejecting housing projects in their communities. Housing industry experts say there's a stigma attached to affordable housing projects when in reality, the people who often need these homes are working Californians who simply can't afford rent in the state.
Those are teachers, those are firefighters, those are nurses, those are middle income. It's odd that we've gotten to the point in California where the middle class needs a subsidy to be able to afford housing, and that gets called affordable housing.
The package includes a $4 billion housing bond, which voters must still approve next year, and a $75 fee for real estate transactions. This means it will be several years before ground is even broken on the first new affordable housing units. San Diego's path to 100% renewable energy got a hearing at the City Council's Environment Committee today. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen has more.
San Diego is considering community choice aggregation, or CCA, as a way to get to 100% renewable energy. The program allows local governments, instead of private utilities, to choose how much energy comes from renewable sources. Activists supporting community choice held a rally outside City Hall this afternoon. They point to the results of a peer-reviewed feasibility study commissioned by the city. The study found the city could provide cheaper and greener energy for city residents and businesses. Later, skeptics of community choice held their own press conference just a few yards away. They've cast doubt on the study and question whether the city will be capable of managing the program. After hearing a presentation on the feasibility study, Councilman Chris Ward says he likes where things are going.
When you get out of it and you just think about it at the macro level, competition should be a good thing. It almost works. This is a business decision, if you will, and it almost works to our advantage to try and help us compete and help us, get to better outcomes for the ratepayers, for San Diegans.
The full City Council will make a decision on whether to move forward with community choice in January. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
San Diego State University backers have unveiled a plan to redevelop Mission Valley. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson says the school's Alumni Association wants to put their plan before voters next year.
The initiative effort could lead to a ballot showdown with the Soccer City project. SDSU West hopes to build a 35,000-seat sports stadium, school facilities, a river park, housing, and hotels on the Mission Valley site where SDCCU Stadium now sits. Kim Kilkenny works with the group pushing for the SDSU West initiative. He says the proposal is a boost for the university and the city.
To sell the Qualcomm site, a public asset, to another public agency so it can continue to be used for a public purpose. And the advantage is the city of San Diego would receive fair market value for the Qualcomm site, and they need the money and they don't want to be in a position of maintaining the existing stadium. And then it allows San Diego State to develop a plan and a new campus and partner with private entities to create a very new, vibrant community.
SDSU backers say they want to build their development without any city or county money, but their initiative does not have a detailed funding plan. Soccer City supporters hope to build a soccer-focused stadium, river park, housing, and commercial space on the same location as part of their bid to land a Major League Soccer franchise. FS Investors welcomes a thorough public review of the SDSU West initiative. Signature gathering could begin in 3 weeks. The idea is to have the measure on the ballot at the same time as the Soccer City proposal. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
The peak of San Diego's flu season is weeks away, but health officials are encouraging everyone 6 months and older to get vaccinated now, especially those with chronic health conditions such as heart and lung disease. Public Health Officer Dr. Wilma Wooten helped kick off the county's vaccine program today in the Oak Park neighborhood of San Diego. Wooten has also been out in the community over the past several months urging people to get the hepatitis A vaccine. She says it's safe to get both vaccines at the same time.
Yeah, it is perfectly fine to get both vaccines at the same time in different arms, of course. So we want people to do that, particularly if it's time for their second dose of hepatitis A.
Last season, the flu peaked between December and February, and 87 people across San Diego County died from flu complications. That's voices of our city choir lifting their voices for people impacted by the city's hepatitis outbreak. It's an issue that hits close to home. The choir is made up of men and women directly or indirectly experiencing homelessness. The majority of people who have contracted the highly contagious virus have been homeless and or illicit drug users. So far, county health officials say 17 people have died and more than 300 have been hospitalized due to the epidemic. Choir co-founder and homeless advocate Steph Johnson says San Diego Police Department's recent efforts to clear homeless encampments is only making the problem worse.
The virus lives in a person, right? So you can bleach the streets all you want, but if you're pushing people to new neighborhoods, the virus goes right with them.
The voices of our city choir's next concert is scheduled for Saturday, October 14th, outside of Copley Symphony Hall. Each year, the U.S. president decides how many refugees will be allowed to come into the country to escape turmoil in their own countries. Since taking office, President Trump has reduced that number to less than half of what it was under President Obama, down to 45,000. KPBS City Heights reporter Taryn Minto sat down with the head of a local resettlement agency to learn how federal policies have impacted resettlement here in San Diego.
This time last year, San Diego County was the #1 destination for refugees.
San Diego County resettled more refugees than any other region in the U.S. last year.
San Diego has seen 626 Syrian refugees come to our community. That is more than any other city in the United States.
Now, there's been controversy across the country over whether to accept these refugees, but San Diego has now received more than any other city in the U.S. since 2012.
But as the fiscal year ends this month, that's changing.
Describe to me the current state of resettlement in San Diego right now.
Well, it's quiet.
That's Robert Moser, the executive director of Catholic Charities in San Diego. The organization uses federal dollars to help refugees get established during their first 3 months in the U.S.
It's not normally quiet at this particular time. Usually August and September is the busiest time of year because it's the end of the fiscal year. But the federal ceiling on refugee numbers was reached many months ago. So right now it's quiet.
The federal ceiling affects how busy resettlement agencies will be each year. As it grows or drops, so too does San Diego's share. Moser pointed to last fiscal year when then President Barack Obama raised the ceiling.
Last year, the ceiling was raised by the previous administration to 85,000. So that was 15,000 more than we had normally done. And they were all coming towards the end of the year. So, in the context of the hurricanes and everything they're having now, it was a perfect storm in terms of large volume, large families, quick turnaround time. So agencies would hire new staff, work overtime, get volunteers and community support to help out.
This fiscal year, agencies were bracing for even more arrivals when Obama wanted to boost the ceiling to 110,000. But after the election, President Trump cut that to 50,000, reducing San Diego's share to the trickle Moser says we're seeing now. The cap for this next fiscal year, which starts on October 1st, is expected to be 45,000. He says this can weaken the resettlement infrastructure because organizations receive funding per refugee, which means a smaller cap can translate into a smaller budget for local resettlement agencies.
When it goes down below a certain level, and particular levels that's being proposed, there will be a lot of resettlement programs across the country that will close. And so then that ability in the future, if there's another large number of refugees coming in, we won't have the system in place.
What's going to happen to resettlement agencies in San Diego?
In reality, over the years, right after 9/11, for example, there was no refugees coming. But at that particular time, the State Department and the federal government saw the need to maintain the system, so they continued to provide the resources.
Resettlement was temporarily halted to review security procedures. Only 27,000 refugees arrived that fiscal year, even though the ceiling was 70,000.
San Diego typically resettles about 3 to 4% of the national total. So whatever the total ceiling was, we would get 3 to 4%.
But Moser says that percentage could be larger if agencies in other areas close and redirect refugees to our region.
The reality is San Diego has always been a main source of resettlement in the country, and as other programs close down, maybe those refugees that were going to go someplace else would be channeled to San Diego to maintain the infrastructure here.
Regardless of the cap and whether closures elsewhere send more refugees to San Diego, our geographic location means some form of resettlement may continue.
The other aspect is we're on the border, and the refugees that are not being admitted, they still may show up on our border by other means seeking asylum.
Asylum seekers can surrender at a port of entry where they may be detained until a judge decides their fate. If asylum is approved, they enter the U.S. and can access some refugee services. The president cannot set a cap on asylum. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
It's been more than 2 weeks since 15 service members were pulled from a burning vehicle on Camp Pendleton. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh has been following the case and has this report.
The accident happened during a training exercise at around 9:30 a.m. September 13. 14 Marines and a sailor were injured in a fire involving an amphibious assault vehicle. The Marines are still tight-lipped. A Pendleton spokesman would not specify how many victims remain hospitalized or comment on what happened. The Washington Post reported the vehicle struck a natural gas line during an exercise. The 1st Marine Division is conducting an investigation into the accident. The Navy is also conducting a separate safety investigation. The Marines expect the report to take several more weeks. AAVs have been around since the 1970s. A replacement was canceled in 2003 over cost overruns. The Marines are now looking at a wheeled version of the amphibious troop carrier that is faster in the water and more maneuverable on land. At the moment, the last of the AAVs aren't expected to leave service until at least 2030. Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
Billionaire innovator Elon Musk unveiled plans today for a new SpaceX rocket dubbed the BFR. Musk says it's the bigger cousin to the Falcon 9 and could be used to bring crews to Mars and launch satellites into orbit. But he says it could have applications here on Earth too, like traveling between any 2 points on the planet in under an hour.
The great thing about going to space is there's no friction. So once you're out of the atmosphere, you will go, it will be smooth as silk, no turbulence, nothing. There's no weather, there's no atmosphere. And you can get to most long distance places, like I said, in less than half an hour. the moon and Mars.
Musk unveiled the new rocket at a conference in Australia. He says cost-wise, a seat on the BFR should be similar to a full-fare economy on an aircraft.
City and county officials blame each other for the spread of the deadly hepatitis outbreak. We look at the accusations. What's changed since the shooting of Alfred Olanga 1 year ago? And we examine the plan for the Delta Water Project and what it could cost us. That's tonight at 8:30 on the KPBS Roundtable.
A second massive slab fell Thursday from the iconic El Capitan rock formation in Yosemite National Park, just one day after a rock fall killed a British climber and injured his wife. Officials say the second rock fall was bigger than the first, in which a chunk of granite the size of a 12-story building broke free. Climbers interviewed at the site say they were awed but undeterred and still plan on scaling the world-renowned climbing destination. Hopefully you had a chance to get outdoors today. After some morning fog, it turned out to be a warm, sunny day in San Diego. Jeff Cornish has more on what we can expect this weekend.
We have some stubborn low clouds in the forecast late tonight, and they'll be back with us on Saturday morning once again. They were a bit of an issue. A couple of flight delays earlier this morning at the airport in San Diego. And by the way, this weekend, the weather is generally helping the firefighting efforts with the Canyon Fire as we approach containment. We're not there yet, but we're making more progress. That's good news. There will be some dry weather, but it's not as windy as it had been. And for the inland crowd, away from the low clouds, it's just a brilliant sunshine setup here for the next few days. As we look at the satellite radar, there's very little to see out there. Most of the action can be found on the regional level. A couple of showers up in Northern California. You can see some of the moisture associated with the next front. But the clouds tied to that are well to the north. There's also some action across parts of eastern Arizona, western parts of New Mexico, and even a little bit of a light mix there in parts of the Colorado Rockies. Far from us, though, we remain dry. Tonight on track for 65, and look out for the fog. It's going to return, and it will be a stubborn issue into the morning hours once again. Details from area to area: 68 tonight into Borrego Springs, 52 in Mount Laguna, 65 degrees in San Diego, and about 10 degrees cooler into Oceanside, California. The spotty showers in Saturday's map are well off to the east, so we stay dry. We get a little cooler out there, especially to the north of town, but we'll lose a couple of degrees in the city as well. And it's a nice bright time, 77, some sunshine into San Diego, Ramona, 89, 100 degrees in Borrego Springs. It's hard to really avoid the heat when the sun is out this time of the year there in Borrego Springs. As we look at the 5-day details here, the coastal forecast, 78 Saturday, but we begin to drop, and there's the cool down that comes for the coastal sections of the region at the end of the weekend and into Monday, especially Tuesday, 74. Low clouds give way to sunshine. That's the rhythm that we are locked into here for the next 4 days at least. Inland areas, a little warm on Saturday, 88, then we cool back down to 84 Sunday, 80 Monday, and the decisive, really significant cool down rolls into Tuesday. Mountainous areas, there we are, mid-70s dropping into the mid-60s by Tuesday. And in the deserts, we're hot, then a little less hot. I'm Jeff Cornish, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next News Hour, America Addicted. We kick off an extensive series on the nation's crippling opioid epidemic. That's Friday on the PBS News Hour.
Weekly World News was notorious for its outlandish covers that caught your eye at the grocery checkout. One of those headline stories featuring a half-bat, half-boy inspired the musical Batboy. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando previews the latest Opie Playhouse production.
Working on a show ripped from the headlines of a tabloid newspaper has its challenges.
But I feel like this is a musical that needs the blood. And so how to figure out that it's not going to stain, it's not going to get on the stage. We kill a couple animals, stuffed animals, not real animals. And there's like a suicide and double murders. You know, I wanted the blood, and so that took a long time to figure out.
Batboy the musical is indeed bloody.
Which is what I wanted. I really wanted it to be bloody but funny. It's bloody funny. That's what it is. It's bloody funny.
That's just one of the conundrums contained in Batboy the Musical, a wild roller coaster ride of a show.
There are times when it's really moving and really emotional, and then there are times that it's just the most ridiculous thing ever. And then There are times when it's a dark comedy, but also a satire.
Its schizophrenic nature may stem from its source material, the Weekly World News' now infamous cover story about a bat child found in a cave.
And they found him, and then he escaped. And then he'd be seen. Oh my God, Batboy was seen. Oh, Batboy kidnapped a baby. Oh, Batboy was at the grocery store.
That tabloid story soon evolved into an urban legend. But it was the absurd photo of that deformed, screaming child that actor Cody Ingram remembers.
That morphed kid where it's like, that's all I can think of. That face still haunts me to this day.
Ingram now plays that kid in Batboy the Musical, and Michael Miserani is directing. The musical was written in 1997, about 5 years after Weekly World News broke its patentedly fabricated story. But the irony is, this fake news story inspired a show that gets to some very real truths.
Well, for the authors, I think it was their chance to address racism.
It is a commentary on humanity, and it's a commentary on don't judge a book by its cover, because everyone has something to contribute to society, no matter what their background or where they come from or the color of their skin. So it's also a commentary on racism.
The climate now is that people are being targeted because of the color of their skin and how they look. And this is definitely that.
Stupid starving freak, Shelly, that's not nice.
It's someone who's come over from a different place, a cave, but a different place, an immigrant, and looks a certain way. And even though he's adapted how they speak and how they walk and how they talk and how they act and their ideas, he's still shunned at the end because of how he looks. And I think that's very relevant right now.
Batboy, kill the Batboy, find him, kill him, find him, kill him, find, kill, find, kill, find, kill, find, kill.
The play contains gothic horror elements, parodies of Broadway musicals, and allusions to Shakespeare. But the creators of the musical understood that the success of the show would depend on the actors grounding the story by creating real characters.
In the first part of the script, it says that this is not a comedy for us as the actors. You're not supposed to play this as a parody. You are supposed to play this as real people.
That's an added challenge for Ingram, who plays Edgar, the Batboy. He has to run around on all fours with bat ears and fangs and limited vocabulary for much of the first act. Tara Sampson plays Shelley, his unlikely love interest.
He is an innocent boy, and so he's my age, and he grew up in a cave by himself, so he's developmentally very far behind where I'm at, but in his heart he's very good and true and just trying to fit in and just wants a family of his own.
That's the tragedy that lies at the heart of this crazy mixed-up musical. Edgar just desperately wants to fit in.
Won't somebody take my hand? Will just one person shake my hand?
I get more and more human. The townsfolk that are supposed to accept me and all I want to do is be accepted by them, they become more monstrous. So it's that interesting dichotomy of the person that is technically the most monstrous or looks the most monstrous is actually the most human, and the people that are the most human or look the most human are actually the monsters.
You don't expect to find a soulful tragedy that gets to real issues of race and tolerance to come from the headlines of a 90s tabloid. But then maybe that's just one of the shocking truths contained in Batboy the Musical. You can't judge a book or a tabloid by its cover. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
Batboy the Musical runs through October 29th at the OB Playhouse. 3 very popular arts events are happening this weekend. Here to help sort it all out is arts calendar editor Nina Guerin.
Let's begin with the Adams Avenue Street Fair, a free 2-day festival in Normal Heights. For nearly 40 years, the Adams Avenue Street Fair has been a great way to explore new music, discover local talent, and hear old favorites. This year's event brings the Dinettes, Gilbert Castellanos and Young Lions, and many more. The festival also has a giant kids area with carnival rides, arts and crafts vendors, and because it's San Diego, 4 beer gardens. It's also time for trolley dances, the popular event that blends modern dance with the outdoors. This year's event happens along the Blue Line from Chula Vista to downtown. Admission gets you a trolley ticket and a map, where you'll find a variety of site-specific dances along the way. In the past, there have been dances in fountains, supermarkets, and museums. So be prepared for an adventure and make sure to bring good walking shoes. If you're more of an indoors person, Art San Diego brings contemporary art from all over the world. This is the perfect place to find paintings, sculptures, photography, and multimedia art. It's also where you can discover and chat with up-and-coming artists. This year, Art San Diego moves from Balboa Park to the Del Mar Fairgrounds, which means more space and more parking. For KPBS Arts, I'm Nina Guerin.
Stay up to date on the San Diego art scene with the KPBS Arts Calendar and our arts newsletter. Sign up at kpbs.org/newsletter. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. And we leave you with an NPR Tiny Desk concert by Bomba Estéreo. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.
Mis letras, sigo cantando con las puertas abiertas, atravesando por todas estas tierras y no hay que viajar tanto para encontrar la respuesta. Que no te preocupes si no te aprueban cuando te critiquen, tú solo di. Soy yo, soy yo, yo, soy yo. Sigo riendo, hago lo que quiera, muero en el intento. A nadie le importa lo que estoy haciendo, lo único que importa es lo que está por dentro, hey. Y a mí me gusta estar en la arena, tirada en el mar sin razón, sin problema, estar sentada sin hacer nada, mira.